Kevin, start us off. Who is your sleeper running back?
Yeah, so when you're looking at just like sleeper is such a hard word because everybody
It
has a
really is.
sleeper and like everybody's out there. I think based on value and where he's going right now and just overall, it's Eric Gray from Oklahoma. Like I'm a big fan of Eric, and I think that as just a Sooner and what he's been able to do there. Now people forget that Eric was actually it's funny. He was running back 3 last year consensus. Like he was running back 3, and then he had 412 yards and was not good. And then everybody kind of fell off Eric Gray, and now he's kind of back. He had 1,300 yards this last year, 11 touchdowns, good burst, and he's got 3-down ability. So if you're looking for like a sleeper, so if we put sleepers in quotes or however you want to do that, like as someone who has like a sleeper here, Eric Gray can be that kid because he has the 3-down ability. Like he could step in and go. Like when you're looking at just his, his ability to get extra yardage, his outstanding burst, he got good long speed too. Like, and he worked on his vision. Like I would say the reason why his junior year he struggled so much is that he was not seeing holes. He was not doing good within that new offense. But then he came back and he did it. Like looking at Eric and what he's been able to do in terms of his 3-down ability, his long speed, like little things like that. And he could be a 3-down guy. I love it. We comped him to Aaron Jones. So if you're thinking like, play style, stuff like that, like he has a lot of similarities to him. Inside zone concepts would be where he'd be at, churning extra yardage, those type of things. And so I really think Eric Gray is being kind of slept on a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. And okay, I know I get a little bit of flack for the sleeper, but you know what? Search engine optimization, man. We got to be found so that people can hear the gems that we're giving them. Okay, sleeper, one of the best words in all of fantasy football and in the NFL draft. So Eric Gray is your pick there, and he's a guy that we didn't really. I mean, you mentioned he didn't really have those big numbers until later on in his career. He did transfer from Tennessee to Oklahoma. So can you touch on that a little bit? Like, because he does have a pretty complete skill set. What was holding him back from really breaking out until this senior year? Like he shared a backfield with Kennedy Brooks in the previous season. So what really allowed him to kind of blossom this year?
Well, I would say last year Kennedy kind of stepped in, and they had that familiarity with that offense, and so that hurt him a little bit. And then he just didn't. He struggled in Lincoln Riley's offense. And then I will say Lincoln Riley leaving, going to USC, and him and a newfound offense this year in Jeff Levy's offense, who's really good offensive coordinator, and he was able to just kind of be himself. They used him well. The offensive line improved as well. And you're just looking at like he got comfortable, right? And sometimes these guys need to get comfortable within the system. And overall, like he just was super comfortable, like just as a back. And you saw that the game slowed down for these guys. Sometimes we forget these kids are young and they can improve and they need that time. And listen, going from Tennessee, Knoxville to like Oklahoma, that's definitely a different vibe too. As like a kid, like there's little
Is
things that
it?
you're a little bit,
Is it?
yeah.
I mean, I've never really hung out in either of Tennessee or Oklahoma all that much, but I feel like there's not
I
too
don't
much of a difference. I'm from South Florida, so
know. You're gonna get our boss mad at you now. I would say Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a
sorry, Joe.
different. Oklahoma's a different vibe, but I just think like overall, like he just improved. Like, and I'm not saying that he's going to be someone that's like a fantasy star, but if he can get that 3rd round draft capital with his 3-down usage, I think he can definitely plug and play. Like he's a guy that this is why this class is so deep because he's getting 3rd round rookie mocks right now. Like, and as far as sleepers goes, like if he falls to the 3rd round, I'll smash that all day. Even if he falls to the 4th round in like real draft, like I'm okay with kind of betting on him.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there with the draft capital, right? It kind of seems like we're all kind of flirting a little bit with the round 3 draft capital, and I think that like the more and more as these years go on, we're starting to see those rounds dip a little bit further where it used to be kind of round 3, but I think you can almost look at round 4 and still be like, okay, this guy has a shot to really break in and play some as a rookie. And we saw that with some of the players in this past class, like Tyler Algier and Damian Pierce and a lot of these guys, not Isaiah Spiller. But I think that we're going to see that with some of these guys. They could actually go early day 3 and be perfectly fine. Vig, you're going to talk about a guy that like I'm not particularly high on, okay? But we did a show with Marco Enriquez not too long ago, and he also liked this running back, and he's a guy I think that could probably go on day 3. So tell me a little bit about Sean Tucker.
And I honestly agree. I like Eric Gray a lot. I also like the guy you're going to talk about next. So I won't steal your thunder a lot. And
No
again, it's
spoilers.
just sort of left. I think what I did here is I struggled, Kev. I agree. I struggled with the idea of sleeper and who is going to be someone that I would consider a sleeper. And I think I just gave Alfredo a bunch of different players that I rank in the lower tier of my running backs. And so we ended up deciding on Sean Tucker. And I think Marco liking him a lot helped a little bit too, because I went back and watched his film a bit more. So I tried to come up with someone who I thought would be like a round 4 kind of guy, which is where I think Sean Tucker might really end up going. And wanted to see who among these round 4 sort of running backs, who has a talent to kind of be someone who could start, who can contribute day one. And it was a little bit of a challenge, but here's what I really like about this guy. We talk about running backs primarily being those guys who can run. We'll talk about his pass catching abilities a little bit later, but Sean Tucker runs well. He runs strong. He has a lot of explosive ability. I loved seeing his contact balance. He's just not someone who goes down easy, but even to get a hold of him sometimes, to get him to go down, you got to like catch him, right? And he had some really incredible footwork among some of these like lower tier guys that we're talking about. We talked about 1,000-yard rushing. This guy had a nearly 1,500-yard season and has had 2,000 yards rushing. Obviously, it was over at Syracuse, but he really has the sort of ability, I think, to fit as a running back in sort of any scheme. But then you start to talk about what we really like to see in fantasy players. And I mean, I just think that his passing work as a whole needs a fair amount of development. I think I described it as being like a nightmare to watch sometimes. I mean, you're not going to see him as like in pass protection. Like if he's on the field, he's not really going to block. And though he did catch the ball and shows us he can catch the ball, and if you look at the numbers, you'll see he was a better receiver of the football than he was in 2021. When you really watch the game, you'll see that the stats don't necessarily match up. He had lots of drops, a lot of awkward catches. I mean, you really want to see someone catch the ball comfortably. He's out there catching the ball up against his chest. Sometimes I was like, ooh, did you even catch that? Was that a little bit of luck? But I guess those are things that can be coached. Kev's talking about these are really young guys. And I think that, he doesn't need that much coaching, I think, to be able to add that passing game. And he already showed us that with a little bit of coaching, he's able to improve. So I think he needs the least coaching among the guys I have in like running back 7, 8, 9, 10, which is where I think Sean Tucker could sort of do really well.
Yeah, Sean Tucker was interesting because he's a guy that I've been hearing about a lot. And Vic, a word that you used for his receiving is that it's just kind of awkward. I kind of use it for a lot of what he does. It just looks a little bit awkward. I like it's not fluid, but it's also like not quite like herky jerky. Like it looks like a guy who the skills never quite improved from high school through college, but he's super explosive and he's a good athlete. And he just took exactly what was given to him. Like he will meet a defender in the hole and he's not trying to cut left, cut right, or he's just like, I'm going to burst right through you. And so like, despite this, he's not really seen as a pass catcher. He's not really seen as like the run over you kind of guy. So is his ideal role just going to be, listen, you're a day 3 pick, you're a complimentary guy, and he could eventually Khalil Herbert his way into a running back rotation?
I think that's exactly what it is, and I think that's the problem. I think he's going to need some more, like I said, coaching to be that receiving back. He's going to need to really work on his pass protection and his blocking. And I think that he currently really just slots in for me as sort of that complimentary guy who is going to be a waiver wire pickup in redraft leagues when his RB1 goes down. But that's sort of what we see a lot, right? Outside of these elite talents, basically the entire NFL has moved over towards this running back by committee. And Sean Tucker is not an elite talent. So you're right. I like it. I like that he can Khalil Herbert his way into maybe being relevant. But I think, again, young guy, I think he's shown us that his talent is there, his strength is there, and sort of the stuff, I guess, like the foundation you need to potentially be moderately successful, if you want hedging words, in the NFL. I think he has all that.
Man, what a spicy show for us. If you want guys that are going to be moderately successdon't.
No. The guys
welcome to the moderately entertaining
to be
show.
Moderately successful.
Don't scream at me on my own show. Don't yell at me on my own show, Pig. All right, let's take a look at my last sleeper running back here. And it's a guy that's become very popular over the last month or so. It's Roschon Johnson, the running back out of Texas. I've got him ranked right now as my RB7 in this class. I know it's a little bit higher than most. And I really, really loved what I saw on film. He's a just massive runner. He's 6 foot 225. And honestly, everyone that has seen him in person says he looks more like he's 6'2", 240. Like he looks very much like a Derrick Henry type runner when you see him in person. And the way he just runs angry all the time. Reminded me a bit of like how NFL scouts were falling in love with Dameon Pierce and his angry running style kind of all the time. But Roschon Johnson's much bigger and surprisingly nimble. given his large size, he's got some good control over his body. He's good taking on contact. And Vig, something you've mentioned with a couple other running backs is pass blocking. He's actually pretty good at it. And he was holding his own at the Senior Bowl. He even broke his hand at the Senior Bowl and just finished practice for that day. And he's like, "Oh, damn, I broke my hand." And like they're like, "Yeah, sorry, you can't really compete in the rest of this." So I mean, like this is a guy that he kind of does everything well. The issue has been he's been behind one of the best running back prospects we've seen in quite some time, Bijan Robinson. So I think that this is a player that in the NFL, Roschon Johnson, he could be getting a short yardage role. He could be getting a passing downs role. And the numbers kind of back some of that stuff up. And so in this draft class, right now, Roschon Johnson, he is fourth in yards after contact per attempt. Obviously, very difficult to bring down at his size. And he's rated as Pro Football Focus's most elusive running back in the 2023 class. I would not have suspected that, even though I loved his film. The 225-pound guy being the most elusive definitely surprised me. He averaged nearly 6 yards per carry in his collegiate career. And like I mentioned, Damian Pierce earlier, another thing that he has in common with him, not a lot of tread on those tires. Okay, we talk about a player that has had just 392 carries over 4 seasons. Not a lot. You're looking at a guy at less than 100 carries each year. In comparison, some other running backs from this class, like Chase Brown and Mo Ibrahim, had over 300 carries in 2023 alone. So you're getting a fresh, big, just manly running back in Roschon Johnson. I think in the NFL, he'll likely be an early day 3 pick. If he goes any earlier than that, I'd be pretty surprised. I think he'll probably end up in round 4. All right, now I want to see what you guys think about this comp. Okay, I gave him Ramondre Stevenson because he's a guy that has the build to be a bell cow. He breaks tackles, yet he's surprisingly nimble for his size, can make defenders miss, and is also surprisingly good in the passing game. Kev, do we like the player comp? Huh?
Yeah, I don't really like player comps anyway. Like
Me
I
neither.
think
I'm not a big fan.
I think it fits fine. Like I think if you're looking at what he is and what he's projected to be, like I think that fits well.
Vig, I'm making my move to be in next year's Football Guys draft guide. That's what I'm doing. I'm planting the seed. All right, Kev. So I do want to ask you. So like, this is something like I kind of jokingly put this out on Twitter today. If X running back had played at Alabama, like I said this about Tyjae Spears, had he played at Alabama and Jahmyr Gibbs stayed at Georgia Tech, and then obviously since it's Twitter, everyone loses their mind. So there's been a lot of if Roschon Johnson had played anywhere else, he'd be a top 3 or 4 running back in this class. Is that something that you think is true, or is this just like we need to stop wish casting and just accept him for who he is? Like we don't have to think about where he would, what kind of running back he would have been had he played elsewhere.
Well, I think the problem with it is like these guys can now, right? Like if in transfer portal and this stuff, like if someone really wanted them, they would be like, "Hey, go get them." Like, and so like that's how I look at like the college football stuff. Like, Gibbs transferred because Alabama wanted him, right? And like then we say, okay, Roschon, like people are out there. I think that's why, like with Vig talking about Sean Tucker, that's why I've been kind of off on Tucker too a little bit, like because of his concerns he talked about. But like everybody's like, well, if he was at Syracuse, well, there's tons of guys that went everywhere else last offseason. Like you want to be wanted. Like Alfredo knows this. Like as someone who was in college football a little bit. Like
I also like to be wanted.
Yeah, they know. Like they know. Like, hey, this is our guy. He can make a difference. Like if Roschon was so good, other coaches would have been like, because there's a running back issue problem at a lot of schools, like a lot of Power 5 schools. Like that's where I go back to like, well, I mean, people knew of him, but they didn't think he was that big of a game changer. So I think that's some of that stuff. You know how these narratives get shifted; they get taken weird ways. So I think that's just something to note. Like, yeah, but now they can. There's player movement now, and it's like free agency now in college football. So like he could have went somewhere, he just didn't. So why is that? I think that's where the talk needs to be, and then let's dive into it.